Right, we are live
Hey,
right
man.
now with one and only Grand Warwick, ladies
Hey,
and
mate.
gentlemen. Hey, dude,
How's it going,
I'm
guys?
super stoked to have you.
Yeah,
For
cheers,
a
man.
couple
I'm
of
happy to be on.
reasons.
I'm
One
just
of the
waiting for
main
Max to crash and
reasons,
blow up.
yeah, one of the main reasons
It's
is,
gonna happen.
and I think what's happening, by the way, I think my mic on your end is gonna be a little delayed. I hope that's not
Yep,
gonna be interruptive or anything, but this
that
is a
should be fine.
special one for me because I'll tell you this. So I was jumping into 3D a while ago. You know, I went through a phase of trying out with Modo and a little bit of
Yeah,
ZBrush and sort of like jumping ship here and there, trying to figure out what
yeah,
kind of software I
yep,
want to use. And I was talking with a buddy of mine, Gavril Klimov, and he was like, "Dude, you jump onto V-Ray. Like V-Ray is fucking awesome." And he sent me some of his renders. Were like, that's kind of cool.
yeah,
Because I was
yeah,
still sort of looking at Keyshot, and Keyshot is
yeah.
very
Of
easy to
course,
use,
of course.
and Modo renderer. But there is a significant difference in quality, and one of the reasons is because how GI is calculated. And you're obviously a master of knowing all of that, so that we're gonna talk about that obviously, because I think a lot of people are gonna be interested in like the differences between the renderers, because everyone's like, oh, do
Yeah,
this and do
yeah.
Arnold, no, do
There's
V-Ray. Like, I know you
there's
have a
always a lot
strong
of hype
opinion. Yeah.
behind different
Um,
things.
so I jumped into V-Ray and I tried to learn it, and I was
Hmm.
like, fucking like the
Yeah, it's
Gnomon
complicated.
DVDs are outdated by 10 years. There are
Yep,
some videos on the internet that say something while others are not saying anything. And it's
yep,
really was really hard to grasp any idea what's up. And then I stumbled upon your stuff and I saw the renders. I saw some people like really talking really good stuff and really explaining how good your mastering V-Ray class is. And I was like, fuck, it's like 200 bucks. It's a lot of money.
hmm
But the more, and then I saw your free videos, how
yep.
you kind of go through the whole experience and UI and explain things, how they work. I was like, fuck, this is what I was looking for. So
Yeah, at the
immediately,
time there wasn't really a lot of very in-depth stuff for the
exactly.
advanced type of things. There was a lot of repetitive tutorials out that were going over the same basic concepts, but nothing was. And there was even stuff for like a lot of ArcViz stuff. There was some good guys doing some good stuff, but like when it came to just like the little details, like how do they make shaders for film?
Yeah,
Little things like that. Like, what's the difference between why doesn't my gold look good and why does theirs look good? And there wasn't
exactly.
anything breaking that down. And I honestly, like, when I first started the course and everything about it, there's like artists have a certain ego about their work. Like there's things you learn and then people don't really feel like sharing it, or they feel like that gives them an edge. And I just had no ego whatsoever because I was so heavily like dead set on doing the boxing that I was like, I'll just do whatever it takes to fund that. I'll
Yeah,
share every last bit of knowledge that's in my brain that I picked up, like every little trick and tip. And it's that type of stuff that I noticed when I did like glance over other tutorials just to kind of get a feel for what was out there that was missing. And it was just it wasn't like personal, like they weren't revealing. It was almost like they were like relaying something else they've learned rather than teaching from like their own personal experience, like what they encounter on a day-to-day job, if that makes sense.
makes a lot of sense. And the moment I started watching your tutorials and your whole course, I was like, fuck, this is so well laid out. I was impressed from the get-go. And honestly, one thing that it made me realize, and we're gonna talk about that, is it's not really about the engine. It's about
No.
anything else that you talk about. I think you're just briefly, or you go really into details on how engine works and what
Yeah.
settings to use.
Yeah.
But your main focus in that one is really not the engine itself. It's really everything else that is around rendering itself that
Yeah. It
basically
was
is cross-platform, right?
100%. It was probably one of the most surprising things because when I first started the first couple of lessons, it had been 10 years since I was using Maya, and V-Ray for Maya at the time was slightly behind.
Hmm.
It wasn't getting updated with the same force. Now that Chaos Group's making a lot of money off the Maya version, it's, the differences are negligible. But at the time, I wasn't sure if people were going to be able to follow it. And early on, I was like, this is making no sense. Like, there's more people buying it from Cinema 4D and Maya than Max, or maybe not more, but just as much. And I got so many questions from people early on, like, is this going to be, applicable in Maya? And I honestly didn't know, but then I had to go down a path of learning what kind of differences there were in the software, and it was just tiny stuff, and that was the whole point, trying to teach from a theoretical point of view, like not just saying, okay, go in and add a V-Ray dirt map and set the distance to this. It's like, okay, let's look at a material. Where is the dust generating? Not focusing on the technical little, the little aspects of it, more
Yeah.
just the overall theory.
Yeah, 100%. And and it does apply. The moment. So I finished your course, and I started also using Octane. And apart
Yep.
from Octane having some quirky naming conventions and sort of like
Yep.
weird settings, pretty much transferring the same settings or ideas from what I've learned by using V-Ray was working
Yep.
exactly the same. So I was like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense here. Maybe before we go really deep into it, let's just
How deep are
maybe
we going here?
yeah, we gotta go really deep, man, balls deep.
Oh my God.
Um,
All right.
I just wanted
Thanks for the heads
we
up.
haven't introduced yourself to the audience. I'm pretty sure a lot of people that are watching it already know who you are, but maybe if you could give us a brief history of of yourself, what you've been doing, your attachment to the industry and whatnot. I know who you are personally,
Yeah, sure.
but I rather have my guest
What got me
talk
to the
about
point
themselves.
where I
Yeah,
was doing
exactly.
mastering CGI?
Briefly, yeah.
All right. Well, I started when I was 15, and at the time I was heavily into sports, but I had an eye operation at the time that, like, if people ask kind of how I got into this whole industry, it wasn't my plan. My plan was to be an athlete, and I was going to be successful doing that. But I had an eye operation, and I couldn't pursue that because I had to have a bloody eye patch on for 6 months.
Damn.
And at the time, my parents were heavily into getting me into school and, making sure that I finished school strong. And in my head, that just wasn't happening. I just wasn't going to be doing that. And they actually got me a computer to do schoolwork on. I ended up quickly, like, photoshopping together seal heads onto people. I just went down a completely different path and kind of got hooked on the whole Photoshop thing. And then it just escalated. I think there was Bryce, software Bryce
I remember
5.
that.
Oh my God, that thing, I just loved it. Like, I actually got hooked on games and 3D equally, which I thought was quite weird because at the time when you're young, you'd learn things a lot faster. That's what I've found. It's always better to get into things earlier because as I've gotten older, my brain has almost changed the way, like, you approach learning. Like, you think like, oh, it's just another thing to learn. But when I was young, I was using the gaming and the 3D to kind of motivate myself. Like, I wanted to create mods for games, and it just kind of snowballed a little bit. I started doing work experience at a retouching kind of graphic design firm, and the owner of the company, his son was a 3D artist working as a freelancer, and he was just this really cool dude. Had a convertible, worked from home. Had this massive render farm set up. With like 50 grand. I just looked at that as a kid, and I was like, holy shit! Like, that's what I want to do. Like, this guy is just nailing it. Like, he just gets to go around, do whatever he wants. He can work whenever he wants. And it was just such like, meeting him totally changed my opinion on everything. Because up until that point, in the back of my mind, I always wanted to do sport. And that's when I was really like, screw that. Like, I want to work. So I basically sat down and started modeling, and I just modeled every single day, like hours and hours and hours, because all I wanted to do was just find something in that industry to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was heavily involved in like just trying to learn sci-fi stuff, but at the time my work was pretty terrible, but I was working like a slave basically, and it was my goal to find a job before finishing high school. So I actually did, like a month before school finished, I landed a job at Fuel International. It was a
Mm-hmm.
visual effects firm in Sydney at the time. They were doing really good work, and it was really kind of, those. You feel like you're at like a kind of hipster indie place where like the building's really nicely designed. You just got a
Right.
group of young guys, working, and that for me was just, when I started there, I was just so into it. I was just like religiously rocking up and like doing whatever I could to learn. And that place, it just kept snowballing and snowballing. From there, I realized that, modeling becomes pretty repetitive once you master that aspect of, hard surface modeling. It's a pretty small, narrow field in the industry. So I decided that was the point where I started to branch out and started to learn texturing. And then I realized I needed to learn shading, and then, lighting, and it just kind of snowballed. So I moved over to New Zealand, got into the print industry, and, just kept working harder and harder. And that was where I learned about, attention to detail and making things work at a much higher resolution than film, because even the film at the time, we were rendering like full HD and then just like upresing it. There wasn't really a requirement for a massive amount of detail in the stuff we were doing. But print really changed that for me. So ever since, I've just been hooked on print and, stills advertising, and I learned a lot in that industry that kind of you don't learn in the film industry. Like if you brought a film artist on to be a print artist, the film artist is going to have a different skill set.
Yeah.
It's very hard to kind of assimilate into print because of the expectations. And when you render something 7K, you realize, holy shit, this isn't as easy as it looks. It's very easy to get something like, for example, this Iron Man here. And this model is not created by me. This is from David Weaver. I'm just, during the stream, creating some shaders. But, this render here is 2200 pixels wide. You can't really see anything. But if I were to up this to 5500 to, 6000 pixels wide, you start to notice all the discrepancies in the bump and the noise and things like that.
Yeah,
So it's just taking things to another level.
Sorry to interrupt real quick. Mache, your mic is doing the robot thing again. You guys
keep talking.
Yeah, you keep
Yeah,
going.
no, I can barely understand him. He sounds
It's all good.
sounds like he's getting swallowed by an avalanche.
Yeah, Mache, don't even say anything until you fix it. But
But
yeah, go ahead.
so that's basically, I just went from one thing to another, and doing it in like a kind of, not, I wasn't trying to learn too much at once, and I think that was the difference. I learned something, like I learned how to create texture. Just a very positive impact on everything. And I had to fund, when I realized I had to fund that boxing.
Sorry to interrupt, Grant.
Sorry, I'm just-
The audio just went.
When I realized I had to fund the boxing dream, I quickly realized I wasn't. No worries.
Can
I'm
you
just
hear me?
glad the technical problem's not on my end this time. Yeah, I can.
All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, you're back. You're back.
Jeez.
No worries. Oh man. Oh, it's like the live stream I did last week, where I'm like modeling this plant and then I go to render it and V-Ray just wasn't updating. And I was sitting there for 20 minutes making updates to the shader while just nothing is changing on screen. But that placebo effect kicked in where I thought it was all good. And people are like, I look at the chat, people are like, dude, nothing's happening. It's just, there's always something. There's always something with this stuff. No worries. No worries.
Last I heard was he was talking about getting
No, it's
into
just pretty much
texturing.
right. I was just running through kind of how I got to this point with, and now I feel like I've kind of explained it all. So yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, no, I do. I do. Right. Right.
Ah, God damn it.
We can do
There
it
you
next
go.
week if you want, man. See you
Technical
Failing.
later.
difficulties.
Failing like a motherfucker. No,
So
there's,
stupid.
dude, it's all good. So, well, what I was saying is, let's start this conversation about differences between render engines and
Yeah.
why one of the reasons why I don't use Keyshot is because it looks plasticky and sort of like a toy, and you for sure gonna have some words in that, and just kind of give maybe people a more of a better breakdown on what are the differences, like real differences, the noticeable differences, pros and cons, and then from there we
Yeah.
will jump into
Yeah.
the fact that it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Um,
Um,
so you you obviously have a vast knowledge in on different render engines. You've been doing this for way longer than I've been
mhm.
fucking learning from you. So there we go. Um, uh, and what I've noticed is like my first impression was I really like Keyshot, right? For instance, Keyshot
Sure.
is super easy to use. Everything is drag and drop. Everything is very straightforward. However, um, anytime I render, it looks very plasticky, right? Or it looks almost like a toy. And it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter on how you set up shaders, apart from the fact that up until now, I haven't been updated in terms of like how long I've been using Keyshot. I haven't been using it for a while now, but
Yeah.
basically, shader system was pretty minimal in my opinion. Like especially after I was learning from what you're doing. Um, whoa, what's going on
Yeah.
here with Go to meetings? It's flipping around.
Whoa.
Can you, John? Can you maybe share your screen for a second and then? Oh, actually, it works now. Damn the technical issues. No, maybe it's
No, no,
good.
it's all good. It's all good.
It's no, it's just basically the screen is now flipping
Yeah,
for
it's
whatever
just
reason.
blinking.
Yeah, just try to switch from Grant to yourself for a second, and then back to Grant, so that maybe that's gonna fix it because there is something definitely going on here that is not good.
You still see the Iron Man and everything?
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
flickering right now.
Okay.
Okay, making presenter.
But yeah, I mean, basically what was going on is, yeah, there's something weird going on here. Dude, we were like having a stream with you, and there's just all the fucking technical issues in the world. Um, maybe you know what we could do is maybe if you share your screen on Skype, and then we bypass this whole thing, this whole mess,
Yeah.
completely. You want to do that,
All right.
Grant, instead of
Yep.
using GoToMeetings? Sorry, guys. It's just
No,
it's
no,
just
all good.
we're probably gonna. I'm really considering switching to Twitch. That's so much easier.
Okay. How do I share it on Skype?
There's like a little plus icon in the Skype call, and then you just go share screen.
Cool. Got it?
Yep.
Nice.
There we go.
Okay. Easy.
Finally. It's not gonna be the best quality, guys, but at least it's working. So yeah, and you know that's the shader system.
Well, the way I look at it, you've got three differences in a render engine. You've got the UI and the workflow. You've got the render speed, and you've got like the functionality. You know, like the subtle differences. So, like the features of the render engine, if that makes sense. So for me, the biggest thing is always going to be the speed, because most render engines are fairly similar these days. You know, it's all based on, you know, if you look at the papers that the render engines are based on, they're all based on things, you know, that like from late 80s and 90s. You know, like the math behind ray tracing hasn't changed dramatically, but there is negligible differences between the different engines. And for me, the biggest thing there is the speed. And I've always found V-Ray to be the fastest in that respect, because it gives you more control over like all the aspects of a scene, whereas other engines kind of have gone down different paths at times. Like I remember when Arnold came out, there was so much hype around the fact that you didn't have settings to adjust in the UI, and there was just this massive bandwagon support of, you know, guys that I'd worked with in film who were saying that Arnold was so much faster, when in reality it was like shit tons slower than V-Ray. But because you didn't have to go in and sit there trying to manually adjust all the settings in the back end and not know what the hell was going on, your perception of how fast things were going was different. All you had to do was just wait for the render to clean up, rather than go through and like, okay, have I got the right amount of samples for this material, or oversampling things. And it was that kind of things like that which separate render engines. So even though it was slower, people were like, it's faster, because they didn't have to go through everything. And I remember when I was breaking down the V-Ray course, people were finally starting to come around. They're like, oh my God, like my renders have gone down from, you know, 10 hours to 30 minutes because I was just oversampling everything in the scene. So there's little details like that. Then there's UI things, you know, some render engines like Keyshot, you know, people go to them because it's just a more simple UI. You know, you look at the V-Ray, let me just bring this up here, you know, if you look at the V-Ray UI, it's quite intimidating for someone who's never, you know, worked with 3D, you know, like what the hell does all this stuff do? So knowing how to kind of even just look, yeah, like what is that to someone who hasn't really used it? So if you've got a render engine where it's just kind of like Octane, where it's just bang, open it up, you know, you're seeing a real-time preview, that's way more comfortable for a lot of people. And I think as time goes on, everything will go down that path. But you know, the difference for me, and the reason why I use V-Ray, it's because of the subtle differences. Like there's just little features that you might not think play a big role in production, but that can totally change whether or not something's, you know, achievable. And that's, you know, that's just why I've always defended V-Ray, and that's why I've always been on that bandwagon. There's obviously things that I'd like fixed or improved in V-Ray, but all the other engines, like, and let me just try and bring this up for you here. I've got an actual example of this very scene. I've just got to find it. I was going through and I was like, okay, what is the difference like between V-Ray and Octane? Because I was pushing more for Octane at the time, but so many of my subscribers were V-Ray. It was very hard to convince people to change.
I remember that you were like,
Yeah, I was like,
about it.
okay, this is ridiculous. Like, there's got to be a way to get V-Ray to look like Octane, and let me try and find it here.
Yeah, there's a few things about Octane that I really like, and there's a few things that I just fucking hate. But to your point, what I found out is, apart from the differences between the UI and speed, there's also some differences in look.
Yes, 100%. There was, by default, Octane has its own color space.
Yeah.
As in, like, it handles things a little bit differently. You can see in this scene of actually this here without this curve on, and let me see if I've got, this here is how V-Ray looks by its, like, just normal without any adjustments. Now, one of the things that I found off with that was that sometimes in the shadowy areas it's just a little bit too dark, whereas in reality there's always a bit more light being pushed in to those areas. So whether or not that was just like a little detail about there's not enough GI being pushed in, a simple fix, by adjusting the curve, which is kind of what Octane was doing, you end up getting all that detail back in. You can see it under here, So just little things like that were separating the two. I just can't find this image.
Yeah, take your time, dude.
Sorry, I'm trying to find it. It's a V-Ray versus Octane comparison. Let me see.
So I'm gonna, in the meantime, ask you for, in your experience, if you compare Octane and you optimize your settings in Octane for the render, and then you optimize your settings in V-Ray for the render. In your opinion, what would be faster? Do you believe V-Ray is still faster?
V-Ray's a lot faster.
Yeah, that's what I
V-Ray's
noticed. I was really impressed. Like, oh shit! Like, with a lot of GPUs, I can really get the nice performance out of Octane, and it was working pretty great for very simple scenes. But the more complex shaders I would be starting to use, or more lights.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell the difference between speeds, and eventually it was just like, oh, this is way slower. Especially with like semi-translucent objects and like subsurface scattering.
It's very hard to not have any bias there. So because I've done so much side-by-side testing of like an actual more scientific comparison where it's not just mental. Like, I'm the first person to admit that bias is so easy to underestimate, because like I said, me converting from Octane to V-Ray RT GPU, I was just like, there was something in the back, like a splinter in my mind, telling me that it was so much worse in V-Ray. Like, it doesn't look the same. It's not as fast. Like, there was just something there that, I had an attachment to Octane, and the more testing I did, the more I realized that it was just a bias, like, it's just both of them are capable. So I've got a render up here this is done in Octane.
Yeah.
Right. Like and you can see on the left here, I've got the V-Ray scene set up. It's not an identical scene, but the look and feel, I ended up getting it very similar. So it's not, this isn't an exact duplicate, but I ended up having the two side by side. I don't know why I can't find that image, but they were literally, like, you just couldn't tell the difference. Right. And then even still, like, I had gotten it to like within 1% difference. And even still, when I posted that, people were saying, oh, but like the Octane just has like a nicer spread on the gold. It's like bullshit, man. Like, if I posted that and said that V-Ray was on the left and Octane was on the right, you wouldn't have known.
It's a bias.
So it's still there's that bias there, even in just when it's like smack in front of you.
Yeah, I guess it's the same thing as it goes to software. Like, some people say,
Yeah.
oh, Moto is the shit. No, I mean, yeah, Max is the shit. No, dude, Maya is the shit. It's just
Oh,
like you
like
get used to UI, you get really used
100%.
to, yeah, really used
100%.
to
I mean,
everything.
if I started, would I probably, like, if I started now in the industry, would I probably use Moto? 100%. Why wouldn't I? Because it's just newer, and I'm sure they do things a little bit more like streamlined.
Yeah.
That Max is just stuck in its old ways. There's things that I'd love to change about Max. I'd love for them to, you know, simplify a lot of the UI, but there's just so much stuff in there that people need, you know. Whereas when a new piece of software gets up and running, there's always new and more streamlined workflows. So I've never been a proponent of copying exactly what another artist is doing. Just do what feels comfortable for you, you know. Is it Octane, you know, V-Ray, you know, F-Storm? Like now F-Storm's come out, you know, and there's a bunch of, you know, high-end architectural, like visualization artists putting renders out on it, and it's like everyone's jumping ship from Octane to F-Storm based on the work of these few guys who've had like 10, 15 years experience, and it's not based on like, you know, like I can test that and I can immediately see the pitfalls. You know, yeah, it's got some great features, but there's like, if you know like a whole range of different software, you can see it's all so similar that it doesn't really matter. Just use whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
100%. Don't be one of those people where you get like 3-4 years in and you're like, I'm going to switch to Max. You know, like if you're in Maya, just keep using Maya. You know, just
it's like a race, right? I mean,
Yeah.
one release Max
Yeah.
is gonna be better. The other release Moto will be better. But at the end of the day, they kind of always break even. One thing I've noticed about, you know, because I've been using Moto, I eventually switched to Max because Max was the original software I was always using.
Yeah.
Was that Max, apart from its quirks and messed up UI, the UI is horrible. Like let's just face it. There's
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
tool is in fucking 5 places for no reason. um, but the amount of stability, like how stable the software is, how it handles really large scenes, and how reliable some things are, especially when I need them. Apart from like, you know, it does crash like any other software. That you cannot prevent that. But when it crashes, you have the auto back, you know, and you're
Yeah.
pretty much certain that you might have lost 5-10 minutes, but it's never gonna be the whole scene.
I can tell you right now, like autoback is not reliable.
Oh,
You know,
isn't it?
there's a file called, like, if you want to go even more hardcore, there's a file called like a .back file that's like an even deeper autosave, and that has saved me a few times because it's
That's good to know.
no, all I'm saying is, you know, the autoback is not reliable. I've done live streams before where I've set my autoback interval to like 3 minutes and lost the scene and then gone in, and the last autoback was like 45 minutes ago. I'm like, you fucking bastard.
Aw.
Like,
I-
you
well,
know,
up
like,
until now, I didn't have that problem yet, so I'm crossing my fingers. What I was saying is, you know, all the tools that I need are in this one software, you know, and I
Yeah.
felt
Yeah.
Max, especially with the introduction of Slate material editor,
Yeah,
that was
sure.
a big change. That was really good for me, and you know, the modifier stack and how it behaves, and basically how many options you have for hard surface modeling and scene setup, and just the community support. You know, there's so many plugins that are for free,
Yeah.
built by communities. Probably one of the most supported software in terms of like
No,
how
the,
much-
the 3ds Max community is definitely the most
Yeah.
active. It's
Exactly.
definitely the most active. It always feels like things are getting pushed for Max first.
Yeah, seems so. I mean, very similar to, you know, what you were saying about V-Ray. I mean, V-Ray was specifically written for Max in the first place, right?
Yes.
For the longest time. And, you know, as business grows, obviously the support for other platforms grows as well. But
No, it's crazy now how many different
Yeah.
plugins they've released. It's like for 20 different things now.
I'm surprised they don't have a plugin for Cinema 4D. Like, the Cinema 4D plugin is basically driven by community these days, right?
Yeah, it's kind of got its own standalone thing. But then again, there's things that they've been able to do differently. Like I remember, and you know, once again, it's just different people are going to have different little features that make a difference. There was a feature that I wanted in the V-Ray material. So you can see here, you know, this is the latest version of V-Ray, but there's no like coating option in the material. So if I want to add like a top coat, as most materials are built from not just one material, but like there's like a, you know, an enamel coating over the top, which gives it that extra reflectivity. There's no option to just like turn that on in the V-Ray material. You have to use a blend material. So for someone new, you'd think like, okay, if I want to have a layered material, like you look at the blend material, and it's quite complicated. You know, you've got a lot of different things in here. You know, you've got to go in, make a V-Ray material at the base, then you've got to make the top material. Like, just give me the option to turn on that top coating. You know, make it a clear coat, and just have it there so that I don't need this massive network of shaders. You can see for this scene, you know, these are barely. This actually isn't too bad. You know, this is an optimized version. I've got some old school shader nodes. Oh, here we go. Here's the Octane shader node for this same material.
Yeah, that's what I
So
really
that's
didn't
how
like
that
about
comes
Octane.
out.
Like the amount of little nodes that you had to
Yeah.
put together in order to get the same result. It's just like, damn, like give me the blend shader actually.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You can see the difference here, you know. There's Octane, and if I go down here, here's the. It actually looks maybe a little bit worse, but that's, I think, just because of all this excess useless stuff that's hidden. Let me just hide these.
So I remember asking you about Corona a couple of times. You know, I know your opinion, but I can see a lot of people are asking about it too. Like, what is your opinion about Corona?
I think it's good. I definitely think it's good. You know, it's got once again, it's just got a different UI. It's got a different workflow, but essentially, Corona and V-Ray are the same thing. You know, minus, you know, give or take those little features.
Yeah, it
you know,
does feel
and people
the same or similar.
People were saying, like when Corona started, that it's so much faster than V-Ray. It was so much faster, but it also didn't have, you know, an extra million lines of code, you know, that went into all the subtle features. And as people ask for those features, Corona will get, you know, more and more bogged down, and eventually that difference will, you know, kind of blend together a bit more. But the fact is, you know, if it's got all the features you need right now, why wouldn't you use it? You know, because it will be faster, because it's not as bogged down by all the random shit that's, you know, people need in V-Ray. You got to remember, the V-Ray community is quite like, it covers a lot of different industries. You know, the people that use that. Whereas a lot of the times when new renderers come in, they're only catering to like one type of artist when they first start, and then it branches out into other industries. And when Corona came out, like it was similar to F-Storm. People were just doing a lot of architectural work on it because you didn't need all the other crazy features.
Exactly.
You know? If I was an architectural visualization artist, I would have been I've used Corona, you know, like it's not bad. It's just like, why do I need to swap from V-Ray to Corona, learn another interface when it's all the same shit?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, V-Ray has been in the industry for so long, and it's one of the choices for rendering. Apart from Arnold, I think it's in VFX one of the top choices.
Yeah.
Arnold, I would argue Arnold is pretty much on the same workhorse as V-Ray. Corona is much younger, and one thing I guess which is appealing to what's appealing for people to all those new softwares is the fact how cheap they are. You know, if you want to be in V-Ray world,
it's very expensive.
It's super expensive. You're looking at thousands of dollars, especially if you want to do network rendering.
They need to
just
do
the dongle itself is like the dongle and the license. Yeah. It's like $1,000 just to start. Yeah. You know. Whereas Corona is like $25 a month, and you know, functionality.
Yeah,
is
they need
similar,
to need to implement that a subscription model.
Yeah.
For me, when like, you know, how many people bought a legitimate license of Photoshop? You know, when it was like 3, 4, 5, 6 grand, nobody except companies was buying. And then they released the subscription model. I don't care, like, you know, I'll pay $30, $40, $50 a month, no problem. You know,
Yeah.
now every single thing on my box, that was like, you know, when I transitioned to teaching and I realized I needed to be legit, it's like, holy shit, it's like $25,000 worth of
Software.
hardware and software just to like, oh, like
Exactly.
ZBrush, there's $700, you know,
Yeah.
three, four, five V-Ray licenses, there's, you know, $3,000, like just adds up so massively.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean that's what's appealing about Corona. You know, it's just like super
Yeah.
easy to get into. They give you 45 days of full functionality. You can do whatever the fuck you want with it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's enough time to learn it. It's
And
just like,
I think it's great that,
yeah,
you know, they have those models because it puts more competition on V-Ray.
yeah.
You
That's what
know,
I was I've been
V-Ray's,
always saying. The more competition, the better. You know, that's what I'm happy to see, like F-Storm and Corona and all the other software that is just being out there. It's like when Redshift came out. When did Redshift came out? It was
oh,
a
that
little
was a
later
long
than.
time ago.
Oh, really?
It was a long time
I was
ago.
always
Oh,
convinced it was coming out like after Octane was in the market. That's
it
kind of
might have
weird.
maybe 7 years ago now.
Damn. All right. And I've been
Maybe.
hugely
I remember,
mistaken.
okay, so once again, you know, it came out and it was doing the real time stuff on the CPU, but it had its own niche for car rendering because it could actually handle CAD surfaces. So when you're
Oh,
doing,
that's
when,
interesting.
yeah, when all the other software, like I was doing car work with CAD files for print at the time, and at high res, you could literally, you know, the retouchers had to paint out things like the geometry being faceted because it
Yeah.
wasn't high res enough. And then Redshift came out. You know, even if it was slower, there was studios that had, you know, 50 node render farms, so it didn't matter to, you know, people who had the rendering power, but it could handle just like raw CAD data. So you could zoom in. They were doing tests where you zoomed in like on the nuts and bolts, and it just all was updating, you know, real time. It was
Yeah.
crazy,
That
you know.
that is powerful. Like
And I
just the
think
fact that
that's how
yeah.
they, yeah, just that one feature alone that no other software had was what gave them an edge. And, you know, that's probably the difference. But in terms of all the other, you know, GI and ray tracing, I'm sure once again it's just the same thing,
Yeah. I mean there are
same paper.
just slight differences. So
Yeah.
there's this there's the two terms that are used in renders. So one is biased and unbiased render.
Yep.
Can you go through like quickly roughly what it is? Because a lot of people I think get confused having like
Okay.
differentiate both.
So the main, like with ray tracing, there's from the camera's point of view, the math involved. It's going to shoot a ray into the scene. So it might be a little bit hard to explain here, but say that ray hits this point on the polygon and it bounces. It's taking information from the shader and then it's bouncing say back and it's hitting the HDRI in the environment. It's taking that information and the math involved there is just calculating what the value of that pixel is.
Yeah.
Now with unbiased rendering, it's just shooting as many rays as it can everywhere in the scene over and over and over and over again. So you end up with, you know, just like in reality where you've got photons bouncing off things endlessly, you know, just trillions and trillions and trillions of photons. Unbiased rendering is trying to simulate that, where it just keeps adding samples everywhere in a unified way. Every pixel will get the same amount. Whereas in biased rendering, because some areas are going to require, you know, some areas are more visible than others, say like in the dark here, in unbiased rendering, all these black pixels are going to be getting sampled the same amount as the samples in the light here.
Mm-hmm.
So with biased rendering, you're saying, where do I need to focus the CPU's power in order to get the image clean without all the useless information that was, say, in the dark areas?
Yeah.
So bias rendering, if done right, is always going to be the better option because from a technical point of view, you shouldn't be able to perceive the difference between the two, but one's going to be rendering a lot quicker because it's putting all its samples in the area that are more useful.
Right. So, in other words, you would say that unbiased render would most likely be more physically accurate.
It is more physically accurate. It does simulate, but from a, okay, you've got like let's look at the image on the left that's biased and the image on the right that's unbiased. Nowadays, the difference is so negligible. It's similar to that V-Ray and Octane scene. You know, people might think they see a difference, but in reality, they don't. And V-Ray's very good at, you know, figuring out where to add samples in the scene. It is more physically accurate. It does simulate, but from a you've got like.
I think I'm hearing myself.
Yeah,
Or yourself.
I'm hearing myself as well.
It's probably someone's either. John, do you have a?
Yeah, I turned it off. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, right. No worries.
Back in track.
another
John, you're
technical-
fired.
Another
Sorry.
technical issue.
I thought I muted it.
So my question would be this. So I mean, before we move into the fact that it really doesn't matter in the end. So what doesn't make? So why, in your opinion, Keyshot looks way more like a toy rather than if I set up the scene very similarly in V-Ray and set up a scene in Keyshot, the difference is staggering in my opinion, you know?
I honestly haven't tested the difference, but I can tell you when you compare render engines that you think there might be a big difference in like the visual look and feel of them, when you break it down to a science and actually, you know, one by one put in the same values everywhere, most render engines look pretty identical. Octane is the only one that doesn't because it has its own crazy internal color space.
Right.
But essentially, they all end up looking the same, you know. I don't know what kind of tone mapping features Keyshot has, like inside of V-Ray here. Now I can use like color grading profiles, you know, like film stock, you know, that you use out of Colorista or something like that. And you can just give the image different looks. I don't know if Keyshot has something like that baked in, or if it's got its own, you know, like you can see the curve I've plugged on here.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't know. But I would say if I opened up Keyshot and tried to render things, it would just come down to the more subtle differences, like do the shaders use the correct BRDF models like GGX, or are they using old school blend stuff?
Right.
You know, which doesn't accurately represent the way that light, you know, reflects based on the angle. So
Yeah, that's
Somebody
one of
asked
the that's
to
one of the
turn-
things. We'll go into questions soon.
Good, yeah.
But so one of the things, sort of continue what you just said. You know, looking at the BRDFs, and so when I was watching your Mastering Vray class,
yeah,
that's one of the things I really realized is like the way you look at the shader and the materials and the textures you use and everything that is connected to it, you know, diffuse, reflection, refraction, glossiness, high glossiness, like all of those things, Fresnel effect, you know, the BRDFs, you name it, right? All of those small things and how you set them up and how you digest the reference and try to match the look from the reference to your shader based on the actual accurate, like physically accurate models. I think you were explaining you were using like refractive
index.info.
the info to get the proper for like IOR for specific shader. So you know your plastic or your titanium or your silver will have totally different profiles, and the way when you change those profiles, it renders completely different. What I've noticed is that once you start really focusing on the shader itself rather than the engine, it's a knowledge that it actually transfers across the platforms. And no matter what kind of engine you're going to be using, whether it's Octane or Redshift, V-Ray, even Modo renderer, if you're not setting up shaders in the correct way to represent the qualities that you will find in real life and try to almost copy it from the real life, no matter how good the renderer is, in some cases it will help or make it worse, but it's never going to look good. And that also applies to lighting. Like if you understand how to set up lighting, apart from just using HDRIs, right? If you know how to set up a scene and you understand what kind of lighting setups give what kind of results, that is a huge difference in terms of what the final result in the render is going to be like. You can have the best rendering engine in the world, fucking thousands of CPUs or GPUs, and render really fast. But if you're not setting up shaders correctly and lighting, it's not gonna look good. And there's one thing that I found frustrating, and I really admired just watching how you go through all the details, and that was kind of a good thing to know, is that you really have to go into those minute small things, the little tiny details, and sometimes your shader is gonna grow exponentially in size. But the difference in adding that extra 1% of reality, you know, if you spread it across the scene, it just makes a huge difference. You know, there's a point in which you're modeling something and adding shaders and you render and it looks okay. And then you add some more work, it looks good. Now going from good to great, that's like 4 times the work than you've done so far.
Like I've always said, you know, the realism is just the accumulation of detail. So you start with the biggest details and you just work your way down until you hit a point where you're either out of time on the job,
right,
or
much
you
like
just
with the painting,
or your just attention to detail isn't good enough to know how to go further. You know, like, very much like a painting, you know, but then it's like, it's different, you know. Some guys in painting, they go in and just finish it as they're going, you know. Like you get those hyper realism guys who are just like work on an eye. They have an outline, but like it's just finished. Like they're doing all the shading and the smoothing and the smudging all at the same time. You can't really do that in CGI or in shading and lighting, because it's just it's not like it's not intuition at that point. It's just like, you know, you look at a shader network like that, you know, I can't know until I've done like the gold, like the basic gold, whether or not I need to go in and start adding tiny little variations in the glossiness for that one particular coat material, you know. So you've got to start big. So even though a shade like this is, you know, it looks quite massive, it's still not, for me, looking at it, it isn't complicated, because you just start at the base and work your way down, you know. I can look at this and realize that all this crap on the left here is only making up probably, you know, like a 2 or 3% of the difference. If I just deleted all that, the shade is going to look pretty similar. But, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I completely agree. You know, this is just basically what I was saying. Like it just exponentially grows the shader tree.
Yes, but it doesn't
1% percentile. You know,
it doesn't mean you need to exponentially focus on all that extra stuff, because like once you kind of put in that little detail, that's there. You know, now I can go back up, you know, to the, you know, higher levels in the shader and work on some of the more obvious features. You know. If you just give me a second, I'll just get a glass of water.
Yeah, sure.
I've just run out.
Easy. We're running as easy as possible.
We're about 10 minutes to the hour too, so we could go into questions whenever you're ready.
No worries.
Maybe when you're back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So everyone who's asking on the chat, I mean, just keep asking questions. John, you know, has the responsibility of basically gathering those questions, and he will start reading them up very soon. We try to not miss out on any questions.
I do have a question for you from the audience. It says,
let's go.
Do you use the advanced rendering techniques of the Mastering Vray course in your job as a concept artist for the games/films a lot?
Well, not a lot, but I definitely do. What I like to do is, you know, after watching that, I would start to set up my own shaders and sort of go through there, save them. The beauty of it is just when you set up a shader, it's already there. And especially if you're working with physically accurate pipeline, where you know that every time you set up a scene, you're going to always aim to get as physically accurate results as possible in terms of like how light is behaving and how your shaders are behaving. Then you know that the shader that you basically create, it's not like a one-off where you're done and you cannot use it anywhere. It's actually, I'm reusing quite a lot of shaders. Yeah, awesome.
I'm back.
I'm reusing like quite a lot of shaders that I built because, you know, metal shader, I'm gonna use it fucking a lot, obviously, right? Anything is metal, then all I need to change is, you know, some details in terms of how the diffuse behaves and whatnot. But the setup kind of remains the same. It's just tweaking from there. It's much easier to tweak something than start from scratch, obviously. So, but I do use a lot of those techniques that I've learned, especially in concept. It's funny because a lot of you know, Shaddy's has been saying that a lot. Shaddy Safadi, a friend of mine, and I've been saying this a lot too. These days, knowing 3D and using 3D in the concept work is the best thing you can do, because it just saves a lot of headaches in terms of how you use perspective, or just even starting perspective or base lighting and everything like that. For me, I have jobs. I've been on jobs where majority of work was 3D. I just completed a commercial job couple of weeks ago. I cannot disclose what it was, obviously, but 99.9% was render. Like I was barely touching it in Photoshop. I was maybe doing some little cleanups and maybe some, you know, color correction, but that's it. Like majority of it would be render, and those jobs happen more and more for me, even though I'm just a concept artist. That was a concept art done completely in 3D. Working on Ghost in the Shell, same story. I mean, I you know, it was a good mix of everything, but I did a fair share of 3D in there. And when you look at film work, especially for newer shows, a lot of like top of the line concept artists are basically using 3D for majority of their things. One of the best concept artists that actually turned concept into production design, there are now production designers like Ben Proctor or Dylan Cole. They come from the same environment where they would be using Photoshop mostly for their work. Now they use quite a lot of 3D. Ben Proctor especially, because he works primarily in 3D, and you know, you can go check his website. It's pretty outdated, but that's what got me into 3D. Like seeing the quality of the work that he have done for Avatar or for Prometheus was just like, holy fuck, like I want to do that. I want to be able to do that, because drawing environments from scratch is just horrible experience. You just like, if you do it all the time, just starting over, it's like the worst scenario of having a blank canvas, right? That's the worst that can happen for an artist. Like you just have to start from zero. That just sucks, man, because the 70% of what you're gonna do is just gonna be repetitive sort of work, and then the last 30% is where you actually do the change, because now the first 70% is actually building a scene, like going through all the foundation of building a scene. And 3D is just like basically like erasing that part from my workflow. I don't need to do line drawing in order to do the painting over or you know, bash some photos together. I can just set up the scene the way I want it, and then work on top of that with Photoshop or whatever. But yeah, just to answer that question, I use as much as I can, and again, it all depends on the job, right? You're gonna have a job where you're gonna have a lot of 3D, you're gonna have a lot of time, and you can do whatever the fuck you want. That's very rare, but there's gonna be jobs where you're on the clock. And then, you know, for me, photo bashing would be the fastest, or sketching would be the fastest. It just depends, but more and more it's 3D for me. It's just I can see the shift going, and I've been talking about it for almost 2 years now, that there's definitely a shift in terms of where concept art is moving. So, all right, so we have Grant back here.
Yes.
Maybe let's jump into questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next one's for Grant. It says, can I learn, or actually both of you guys can answer this one. It says, can I learn 3D easily on my own? How long is the learning curve?
So I'm fully self-taught. So even when I was first starting out, I didn't rely on tutorials. There was, so it's 100% possible, but I also had to sacrifice my social life, my, you know, family life. Like I didn't go outside. Like I was that definition of a nerd who's like locked away in a cave. So if you want to learn how to do it, you don't need uni, you don't need college, you don't need my courses, you know, you don't need anything. You can learn it all yourself. But I wouldn't recommend that now because this was early on in the industry. I'd say it's easier now to get 80% of the way there than it's ever been, you know.
Yep.
So it's a great time to get into the industry, and there are guys now, there are teachers now that know what the hell they're doing. You know, for a long time, 3D pretty much only had free tutorials that people use. Like there's always been Gnomon and things like that, but I'm talking like real workflows. You know, like something that's going to make you understand how someone works in production, and not just saying here's how to render a car and copying the lights into the scene. Like it's much easier now to get into it.
I think we
So
lost
yeah,
your screen, by the way, Grant.
oh really?
Yeah.
Hold on.
This next question is,
Yeah,
I
let
think
me
it's-
answer that too.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you, Grant. I mean, it's so much easier to learn software these days. It's just
Yeah.
like you have
Yeah.
almost unlimited amount of resources.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much going on there, you know.
There can sometimes be too much, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that was another reason why I just relied on learning it myself, because it's once you stop focusing on like how to learn a specific thing and start focusing on like just how to learn in general, then you rapidly start to improve. You know?
Exactly.
Stop overthinking about the little things. Like when you start out, your work's going to look shit. You know, everyone's work looks shit when you first start out. You just got to keep pushing through it. You know, work on the worst part of your scene rather than trying to make everything look awesome, and just every project make a little improvement.
Yeah.
And I learned how to model in 2 years. I think from not touching 3ds Max to 2 years later, I was happy to model everything, you know, within reason. You know, I couldn't go and design my own character. I couldn't do anything like super complicated. But if you asked me to model a chair, you asked me to model a laptop or a car, I knew how to do that. And that came from 2 years of work, doing, you know, a few hours a day, every day. And, you know, that came for me to learn lighting and shading was once again probably another 2 or 3 years, you know, from start to finish before I could happily take any job and have a go at rendering it.
Yeah. One interesting thing, you know, and kind of, I guess it kind of connects to what you're saying is, you know, whenever I'm watching your tutorials, your courses, is how thorough you are with everything, and you have like this structure of learning. You know where everyone has to start.
Yeah.
And you're starting with the very base, the very
Yep.
sort of like bare bones. And once you get a grasp on that, then you move on and you move forward. I know, like when you learn 3D, it's funny because I'm pretty sure you have the same experience. Like once you learn it too, like, oh, I'm gonna build this, I'm gonna build that, and you like kind of starting to do it, and then you fail miserably because you still don't grasp the concept yet. That well. So doing the trash cans and fucking microwaves is probably still the best way to learn.
Look, I think where I'm coming from, when I'm doing a lesson or when I'm recording, I'm not just trying to say what buttons to click. I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of someone who it's completely alien to.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me to do that because I am self-taught. So I remember how frustrating it can be when you just can't find an answer to something. And I also remember how frustrating it is when someone tells you what button to click, but not why you're clicking it. So you click it in one scene and it works, but then you open up another scene and it doesn't. And you're like, well, this is bullshit. Now I've just got to go in and learn how to do it myself anyway.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
So that's where I'm trying to put myself when I'm teaching, you know, like, what does this look like to someone else? You know, like, am I just talking shit? Am I just, you know, saying something for the sake of saying it? Or is this actually going to make a difference to my workflow, understanding this certain feature? You know, there's things I don't cover also. You know, I don't cover, like, I'm thorough, but I don't cover absolutely everything. But if you cover the stuff that you know, like, in the back of my mind, I can hear someone say, like, well, why does it do that? As I'm explaining something, I'll stop, I'll re-record that part of the lesson and explain it as if someone just asked me how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of actually loops back to what you're saying. It kind of loops back to previous question. You know, it's just when you get into learning, like there's so many resources, but then again, like the amount of resources can be also overwhelming because not all of them are going to be useful. And you know, I've been fucking shouting out loud like when I learned V-Ray, go on, you know, mastering CGI because of that reason. Like, you're not selling bullshit like, oh, this is how you render a tree or you render that. You're actually explaining from the ground up. It's you know, in concept terms, it would be you know, teaching the foundation, because you need to know foundation. You know, as much as I say go into learning 3D, I'm also going to say if you want to be concept artist, you need to know foundation. You need to know how to draw those things. You need to go through the grueling 70% over and over again to hate it to a point where you're like, okay, this is the time to switch to 3D. Because if you just rely on one thing, just rely on one technicality or tool, it's going to work great on one project. But what happens if the client throws a curveball and you have to use something else? And then
that's the biggest thing in any industry, just being able to be consistent, you know?
Yeah.
Like you can talk about photography, and I had this argument when I got a new camera for taking textures, and I went out and shot a few things, and I got a bit egotistical. I was like, you know, that was so much easier than I thought it would be. But then someone said to me like, okay, if a client came to you and said, now I want you to match that shot with, you know, another 5, you know, pieces of talent, are you going to be able to do that? And I was like, well, you know, maybe not. Then maybe I just got lucky on one specific image.
Yeah.
You know, it's knowing how to constantly reproduce stuff. So even though people have asked me, like, is Mastering Vray like a beginner's, intermediate, or advanced course? And
all of it.
It's not. It just goes through. It starts out basic. People who have no idea, like, I don't just assume that you know what, you know, all the features. Like if I'm working with dirt map and trying to explain it to someone, I don't just click invert normal and assume you know what the hell that does. You know, like you've got to assume everything you're clicking. They have no idea what's going on.
I found that to be a best approach, even for a professional or someone who's, you know, already knows how things work.
Yeah.
It's also a good refresher and reminder. You know?
Yeah.
Like just using those clicks. Sometimes you just forget how the tools work. Or
it's can be the most annoying thing ever. Like, so I remember looking at how to model car tutorials, and a guy would explain for, you know, 30 seconds. He'd explain what he was doing, and then he'd just keep modeling, and it was like swapping back. This is going back now, like I'm talking 13 years ago when I first started, and you're like, fuck, like what did the guy click to do that? And it's sometimes so subtle, you know, such a subtle little click or a shift, and instantly like his viewport's changed and you don't know where he is on the screen, and you're sitting there just going like, oh my God, like this is so, like I'm pausing and starting this tutorial. And when I made mine, I wanted to take that out of it. I wanted you to be able to just watch it and just, you know, there it is, you know.
Sorry
Sometimes
yeah, there's a lot of questions, and we're at
let's go
4:06 right now, so just a heads up.
I don't know how much time you have, Grant.
I reckon I've got about half an hour.
Okay, let's go with more questions then.
Yeah, sorry if you wanted to finish your time.
No, all good.
All right, cool. This one says, how do you get started on landscapes? If you're doing landscapes, I think it's for Mache.
I don't know. How do you start on landscapes? So obviously, you have to know.
I don't want to take the question, man.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time here.
It's a big one.
You have to. Yeah, it's a big fucking question. I'm gonna answer it as quickly as I can. You have to have a knowledge on, you know, on the basics first, like how perspective works, how to construct things, how to deconstruct things that you see, in order to construct them in a different way. Like once you get that knowledge, once you know how architecture works, once you know how, or like if it's architectural stuff, then knowing architecture. If it's landscape, then understanding materials and understanding geology, at least a little bit, so you know how those forms are being formed. Understanding lighting, and once it's sort of like you slowly but surely apply the knowledge that you gather over time. and apply it to your work. But you have to know foundation. You have to know how to draw in perspective. You have to understand lighting, and you have to understand color. Once you understand those three aspects that are basically building blocks of foundation, then it's all about like that. You're past that, say, first 50% where it's just base stuff, and then it's all about finding details in reference and design and all that stuff. So
Sweet. This next one says, how do I approach my studies? You guys could both answer that one.
Just lock yourself away in your room, man. Don't leave. Say goodbye to your friends. Say goodbye to your family. Just become a social retard. You can always pull it back. It only took me 4 years. I couldn't socialize after my version of studying. I don't know if you want to ask me that question, because I was a monster. When I stopped doing 3D so much, I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, holy shit, that's scary. Like, who did you become? Like, I couldn't talk to anyone, couldn't talk to friends, couldn't talk to girls, couldn't do anything. I wouldn't socializing was uncomfortable for me, which was weird because growing up I wasn't like that. So it just depends how hard you want to study. But I would just say, Google images, lock yourself away in your room, and maybe look at some YouTube tutorials for stuff. But pretty simple. It's just time. It really is. It's just time. How much time you put into
time
it.
commitment.
Yeah, it's just the time.
No distractions.
Yeah, you can distract yourself.
0% beach in the summer.
I used to have 3 screens. I used to have bloody Family Guy up on one screen, reference up on the other screen, and maybe sometimes like a movie as well. Like I had 3 things going on my side screens because I didn't have a very good attention span. So you do whatever it takes, just do whatever it takes to be able to, sit there for 8, 9, 10 hours.
Yeah, and then you feel like a vampire. You walk outside.
Oh, 100%. But you know what? Like if you love it, then that's just great. It's your fun. That's your zone. Yeah, that's your zone. But yeah, I'm probably not the best person to ask like what studying is like, because yeah, I was a wreck after it.
Next question.
I was an absolute wreck.
Next question says, is a degree necessary for becoming a concept artist?
No.
I know this has been asked frequently, but I would like to know.
That's already answered. No.
Got it.
No. Quit uni now.
Yeah. Who cares?
I'm not even a concept artist, and I can tell you right now, no.
Nobody cares.
No.
All matters is your portfolio. That's it.
Yep.
Any alternatives on learning concept art? Affordable alternatives.
Fucking learn Square, dude.
God, I've been like holding off pitching my own stuff the whole time. Now here you come.
You can start with YouTube. There's so much shit on YouTube that is free. It's just a staggering amount. Or even, watching the live streams of artists, your favorite artists, and just sort of like looking what they do on the screen, just listening and just looking how they do stuff. I know it's like not really teaching you anything, but it definitely kind of gives you an insight on the workflows of those people. And knowing foundation. Like you just start with foundation, knowing perspective, color, and lighting. Like once you know that, once you understand how it works, it's granted you're gonna move forward pretty fast. So
this next one says, what are the best? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
What are the best add-ons / plugins for 3ds Max for rendering? Everything seems to be going in the direction of sample rendering and third-party 3D painting softwares. What is worth looking into?
It's for me. I've got a pretty simple workflow these days. It's just 3ds Max, Vray, Forest Pack, Photoshop. Keep it simple. Forest Pack is highly underestimated what you can do with it. But
I saw those renders you did. Holy fuck, that was Forest Pack.
Which ones?
The branch, like what wasn't the branches? It was like ferns.
Oh, the ferns. Yeah. That's Forest Pack. But that's not even that's not even what I'm talking about. Like I'm talking about like you can like in the latest V-Ray lesson, you can use it as a particle system, you know, for scattering little things like dust on surfaces. And I mean, actually, like, you model hair and fibers and assign like a glass, like, because if you zoom in on on dust, it's basically just a whole bunch of, you know, tiny glass and diffuse particles. So you can scatter like millions of those and simulate the effect of dust using that plugin. So I use it almost as like a shading tool, you know.
Wow.
It's cool.
I want to watch that. I'm gonna watch that. I'm gonna fucking watch that.
It's quite simple. It's just there's no difference between scattering dust and grass, you know.
Yeah,
it's
of
just
course.
But the effect. Oops. Sorry, my headphones came out. The effect it gives is, you know, very different.
Yeah.
This next question says, is there any equivalent to using the 3ds Max fall-off curve in Maya?
Okay, so there is, but this is going back. You're taking me back now. When I first released it, obviously there wasn't anything, you know, Maya was acting a little bit differently because that wasn't a V-Ray specific thing. But I think there was a guy who wrote a script that emulates it. Let me just pause this render and I'll see if I can find it. Is there any way I can like give you a link afterwards to?
Yeah,
we'll
to
post
share?
it in the.
Just because it's going back, but there is a guy released a script which gave you a fall off. I actually had this up earlier. I don't know if anyone noticed. I swapped to FStorm because I wanted something like this implemented in V-Ray itself. But if I just go into FStorm here, I'll just, of course,
just post the link in the Skype.
3ds Max just crashed. I knew it was going to happen before this stream finished. I said it. I called it. I fucking called it.
Fucking 3ds Max crashing like a bitch.
Every time.
Every time.
Stream. It
But
had to do
hey,
it.
Moto did the same to me. Moto was just torturing me with crashes as well. So I got used to it. You have to be. It's almost like when you work, you almost have to sort of have like a backup plan if something goes wrong, or save often. People are saying save often.
Let me bring this up here. Okay, so one of the things I really love about what FStorm's doing is, and you'll know I was kind of trying to teach this in the course, but say I just go into reflection and I apply an FStorm fall-off map. It's not your typical fall-off that you're used to where you've got like a black and white color and you're plugging in a texture or something into both of those. This, you can actually see like a physical representation of what the IOR is in the fall-off. And you can see as I go higher up into more metallic-like IORs, like they've coded it in to blend that specific, you know, fall-off and the reflectivity.
Oh, that's
and the
pretty fun.
reflectivity you're seeing here is what metals actually do. But I don't know how they've managed to see how it blends from like a normal plastic-like material where there's not that dip there. But as you go higher up in the IOR, like the physicality, so things like that, you know, those are the little differences that make up why people choose certain render engines. But you can duplicate this in Maya. I'll find the script for you.
Next question.
This next one says, how can I develop my eye to study more material?
Zoom in on images. The higher res reference you have, the better. So if you're looking at something, like I do break this down in the lessons, how I always go into Google Images and look up, like you can set Google Images to search for high res images only, or I would suggest going out and taking your own reference. That for me is, I didn't do that at the start, and now I've got this good camera, I go in and take my own reference. Higher resolution the reference, the better your materials are going to be, because if you're trying to match like a gold or something with a low res image, you miss all of the stuff that, you know, it's there but you just can't see it because it's a little bit blurred, but it is contributing.
Yep.
Next question says, can you get decent renders with the laptop? If so, what should we look for? Thanks.
You mean from a technical standpoint, you can get the exact same render out of a laptop as a workstation, but are you willing to wait, 20 times as long. I'd say it's kind of unrealistic. I've never been able to work on a laptop as my primary, I've never had a laptop that was like designed to be a workstation. But if you're asking if you can use just your typical everyday laptop, probably not. It's quite, the reality is you're dealing with something which needs a lot of render power.
Yeah.
It's not a game, you need the power. I've got 4 render boxes here and 2 of the Titan Black video cards, like $5,000 of render boxes and $3,500 of graphics cards.
Yeah.
And I'm still like, I need to update that massively, so probably not.
Yeah, especially if you want to go into like deeper.
Very simple stuff.
Yeah.
Very simple stuff.
This next one says, is the Cintiq the best touchscreen art tablet?
That one's probably more for you.
I would say so. I mean, you have iPads, obviously, the iPad Pro. You have the Microsoft Surface, but that's more of a sort of a tablet approach. If you want to work with a workstation, I would say Cintiq would be the best option. It's an industry standard. There are some different manufacturers that are trying to get into the field, but I mean, right now, I would say Wacom has basically a monopoly. Yeah, it's just.
No.
I mean, there's a lot of things I love about. I have the new one. I finally upgraded to the new one, the 27-inch Cintiq. It's fucking amazing. But there's still annoying things about it. It's like, fuck, I'm paying so much money, and there are some really weird shit that could be easily fixed, and there aren't. So that always happens with hardware. But overall, I think the newest Cintiqs Cintiqs in general are really good for what they are, and there is really no alternative in my opinion.
You know what I realized the other day? Just how indestructible Wacom tablets are. You remember how there was that meme?
Durable,
oh my god! Remember that meme where they were like showing the NASA spaceship covered in Nokia phones? Like they were using those Nokia phones as the tiling. I honestly think the Wacoms are a pretty good contender for that. Like they take a beating and still just keep going.
Just to give you a perspective, my older Cintiq, 24-inch, I bought it here in US, and then I went to Europe for a year. I flew it there and back here in the cargo. So it was fucking thrown around by TSA and other assholes in the airport. And it still worked perfectly. So
yeah, they're just like, they're indestructible. They're indestructible.
And I upgraded not because it was broken or anything. I'm actually selling it. I think I already have someone who's gonna pick it up. But yeah, it's just I want to upgrade it. I wanted to upgrade for larger screen space, and that was the only reason to upgrade. It was still working perfect and still works perfectly after like how many years? 5-6 years.
Crazy. Crazy.
What do you think, Grant, of the fact that Autodesk bought Arnold?
It doesn't really affect. Like, I think that it's a smart move from them, but I would never use Arnold. I don't think there's anything Arnold has to offer that V-Ray doesn't. That's faster. But I think the only reason Autodesk hasn't bought Chaos Group is probably because they, haven't been offered enough. But maybe if Arnold was implemented into Max, but the issue with Arnold is it's not going down that biased pathway. So I just, it's hard for me to answer it because I don't use Arnold. I'm not a fan.
Will you be giving F-Storm a chance or try it out?
Yeah, I've given F-Storm a chance. I've used it, and I think it's got it's fast. But then there's just the little things, like when I go to update a material, and I've got a complement. Like, you look at this material here, I tried to convert these materials to F-Storm, and I would go in and zoom in on say the fall off here, which is controlling some kind of reflectivity or glossiness, and I'd sit here and click, and then it wouldn't update, and the viewport was going really slow. And then I hit up a couple of other people, and they were experiencing the same thing. Now, will those things get fixed as time goes on? Like 100%, like they have to. But early on, it's little things like that which make you scream. So, not just yet. But
Yeah,
I think
it's good to test, right? Just
if you're
to
new,
play around.
yeah, 100%. If you're new, you're making simple scenes. You know how to use Octane. Why wouldn't you use FStorm? It's very similar. It's free, you know.
Yep.
Why pay $350 US for Octane? I've actually been very frustrated with Octane's development because for such an innovative renderer, like being the first company to swap everything to solely GPU, you know, they just had so much potential and then just put way more development focus on little things like VR and, you know, their cloud service, but the actual tiny features that people want, they just kind of stopped working on. Octane remained technically the same render engine for like 3 or 4 years.
Interesting.
How do you think? How do you think we could reach the price of photographers for our work? Sorry, hold on. How do you think we could reach the price of photographers for our work? Because we reached them, their quality, our lots are on the way.
Some studios do charge the same amount as what a photographer will, if not more.
Depends
You know?
on which photographer, because
Yeah,
you're talking
100%.
about top of the line, 10 people in the world, they're gonna charge millions, and that
Yep.
rightfully so. They've deserved
Yep.
by just doing what they're doing for a
Yep.
fucking long amount of time, and you know the work shows. It's like it's funny because you kind of said it before already. You went out, did some photos, and then like, oh, I can totally do that. And someone asked you like a question, but would you able to do it with changes like these and that, or comparing it with different like models or whatever? And that's absolutely true. When you look at an image, you look at just a photo, and like, oh, it's a nice photo. I could probably take it. No, you fucking couldn't, dude. Especially if it's a studio photo, there is so much setup that goes into a photo shoot that you don't even imagine.
People underestimate retouches too. Like working at Cream, they have, you know, guys who are, you know, top 30, 40 in the world who've been using Photoshop since it existed. And the amount of work they do, sometimes they do take a photographer's work that looks shit and just paint over it almost, you know, and make it look good. And that can be frustrating. But those jobs, you know, they're charging a lot of money to do that, you know. So I've seen jobs where the 3D side is getting billed out more than the photography would have. So I think it just comes down to, I mean, are you talking as a freelancer, like just you yourself? Because then it can be obviously a lot more difficult, but it kind of comes down once again to how much are you willing to defend your pricing?
Yeah.
And 3D artists, this is one of the topics I wanted to talk about. 3D artists in general just do not know how to defend themselves at all. It's just not in their skill set.
Artists in general, you know.
Artists in general.
Yeah.
And if you want to charge more for your work, you need to have that confidence when you're not even just about your folio, but when you're actually talking to the person about the job. You have to make sure that when you're talking to them, you know, like they know that you know what the fuck you're talking about, you know. When I started
art only.
No, it's about that business aspect. You know, there's that business like ruthlessness. You know, go watch Wolf of Wall Street, because the guys who have that skill set where it's just like, you know, like get the sale. You know, they're the ones who might not be as good an artist as you, but they pitched it better, and therefore, you know, they had the upper hand.
No.
This next one says, is Marmoset a good render engine? What are your thoughts on that?
Because I haven't worked in games, I haven't really used it, but I think for real-time previewing, it's pretty awesome. I remember seeing it early on in development, and it was kind of like a new way. It was like a blend between a render engine and a game engine, which was pretty cool. It was totally different, but then again, I saw a lot of the limitations, you know, with the shading and things like that. But I mean, far out, like nowadays, I don't even know where it's at. I'm sure Unreal Engine, like I'm seeing stuff come out of there that's, you know, just as good, even though it's faked. even though you're not using like fully unbiased ray tracing or anything, the fake is still looking pretty damn close to reality. So, maybe Marmoset's gone the same way. I don't know. Does Marmoset use its own render engine, or is it
No.
tapping into another engine like Unreal or something?
No, I don't. I think it's standalone.
Right. Okay.
In one of your tutorials, you said Octane has more realism out of the box than V-Ray. Can you explain that? And what do you think of F-Storm as well?
Okay, so when I said that, and I remember saying that, that was when I was a little bit more biased in terms of like what was possible. And since then, I've done comparisons where I have been able to match the look of V-Ray with Octane. But obviously, I went through a learning curve there. So straight out of the box, Octane is using its own color space and tone mapping. So if I load this up here, let me just get it started. Sometimes just little, like, even though something that might not be physical, applying a grade or coloring adjustment to it can make it look more realistic. And Octane does that out of the box. It's got the AG for 200 or something like that. Let me find it here. You see in the LUTs.
Yeah, it has those
It uses this. It uses this color adjustment. So if I've actually got an older scene here. Sorry, I'll have to give me 2 seconds, and then I can explain.
Sure.
I know we don't have much time.
God damn it, Warwick.
It's all the time you have. Pretty much that. So
Yeah.
if you have time, then we can talk as much as you can.
Okay.
This is a special one. You're a special person.
Okay, so this is rendering here, right? And now out of the box, I can turn off the curves and the LUT file, and it's going to look like this. But out of the box, Octane by default has this color adjustment baked in. It's very subtle, but say on the gold, just little things that you notice there's more of a green tinge through the gold. Now, will this work on every scene? No, but Octane has a whole bunch of different LUT files that you can load. So I can go in and apply, different effects, and it'll give different looks. There's real-time bloom. So another thing that V-Ray doesn't have is real-time bloom and glare. And I actually spoke to the one of the developers of V-Ray, and it was like, dude, enough is enough. Like, so many people want it, and you guys just haven't delivered it. Like, is there any chance that you can look into it? And he was saying, like, don't you dare tell anyone that I said that I look into it, because I can't promise anything. But he's like, I don't want to over deliver. I don't want anyone to get any ideas. Like, I don't know how difficult this is going to be, but I'll take a look at it. So I'm pretty confident in the next, 5-6 months, we'll see. Maybe that's just a random number. I'm just kind of trying to be generous here. We'll see real-time bloom and glare.
Yeah, having a real-time bloom and glare in V-Ray RT would be perfect. I like that they are updating RT to be almost as in par with
there's still there's so many little things that just are missing. It's so frustrating. Like, I tried to use V-Ray RT in the latest lighting lesson, and it doesn't support. In the V-Ray lights, there's this setting here I'll show you called directionality, and that will like hone in the focus of the light to more of like a tiny spotlight. And it doesn't. I used that feature in production when I was doing early tests, and then I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this lesson in V-Ray RT, or at least parts of it. And the main fucking key light in the scene doesn't have that feature supported.
I have actually a question. Do you have
see, I'm adjusting it. It's not making any change.
In your lighting course, do you teach gobos as well, or
teach gobos?
Yeah.
Not
yet.
That's
something I'm curious about, because I've tried to find setups on how to set up like nice gobos. Octane seems to does it really well, especially with Cinema 4D. But Max and V-Ray, I've been trying like so many different things, and I never get the results I want. Like almost like the perfect projection of a texture into the scene. So, but that's like a separate subject.
In later lessons, but right now, like I'm trying to focus on in the lighting course, like how I approach a scene, because I always said that the progression was going to be from learning the shaders, then the modeling, then how to put together a whole scene, like obviously across the 3 courses. And then I realized that people wanted a little bit more theory in the lighting, which was a little bit difficult because I was self-taught. I didn't learn lighting like a photographer would. So for me, it was just pixels on the screen, just do whatever it takes to make the image look good. And now I'm realizing that I have to go back and learn like kind of the fundamentals of lighting myself.
It helps for sure.
Yeah. And I've improved as an artist myself, but when I started, I was only trying to teach how I did it, not
it's
how.
It's funny because like if you would try to organize a photo shoot, like a legit photo shoot, I did that for being an apprentice for our teacher at Learn Squared, Jing Zhang, artistic photography course, and I did that as a part of a homework. And setting up the photo shoot made me realize how light placement, light direction, filters, modifiers, power, distance between objects, like all of those things model the light in a different way. And once you get a grasp on that, it kind of gives you, like when you look at especially product photos, and you're always wondering like how did they achieve a specific like highlight or something, right?
Yeah.
And you start to understand when you do that in real life, when you actually use strobes and professional equipment, you kind of get the idea. Okay, this is how it works. This is how modifiers are used. And when you apply that to your when you're building a scene, that totally changes the way you're actually like approaching it and the way you're building the scene. Because then when you're creating a light, for instance, right, like a rectangular light, you're not thinking about, oh, it's gonna be yay big, right?
Yeah.
No, you're thinking like, oh, okay, this is gonna be 2 by 4 feet, or this is gonna be 5 feet octa, and that
you can't change the scale.
So. Yeah, and when you sort of place that, then you can sort of start moving it around a little bit, and that gives you that studio sort of result,
Yes, you're moving the light further away to get the size difference, and then you're increasing the strength because as you go away. Whereas in 3D, what I was trying to explain was I didn't learn it like that. I had HDR Light Studio, where it's basically, you just click where you want the light and then you adjust the properties. In reality, if you were to convert an HDR Light Studio scene into a studio scene, some of the lights would be 50 by 80 meters, and stretching into the distance. Like it wouldn't physically be possible to do that. But, at the end of the day, it's just an image, whatever you have to do to get the reflection to wrap around where you want, that's what you do. And now I'm realizing how far away from reality I was. So I've worked with a lot of photographers, and I've always had like a kind of mix. Like there's been scenes where the photographer has like been completely anal, giving me dimensions of all the lights, giving me like photos of his shoot where he's put everything, and then I go in and match all that effort and render it, and I'm like, it just doesn't look right. And then I'll go put one simple V-Ray light in with no textures, just, from like kind of trying to estimate what he was doing, and it looks better and it's more in situ. So there's always a bit of that blend there.
Yeah.
Because photographers bounce light so much, and that's such a like computationally expensive thing to do in 3D.
Yeah.
Like if you've got a car, why bounce light off the wall in order to create a gradient? And then you've got things like, the exposure. You don't know like the exposure settings, so you don't know how bright that light was. You don't know how bright the wall's diffuse color is.
Like a full spectrum of settings.
Yeah, a full spectrum in order to replicate what that light's doing. Or you could just go into HDR Light Studio and just slap it there in 3D space, and
Going into the next question, it says, what's the best way to learn materials in V-Ray?
Mastering CGI.
Yeah.
I'm not joking, dude. It's the best right now. I don't think there's anything else that there's. Okay, so you can definitely
You've got the
find,
free lesson too. If you don't want
yeah,
to buy anything, you've got my free lessons. So
and you can find a lot of free shit on the internet, but it's not gonna look great. You know, like
that
when
lesson
I
4,
watch
part 2.
your stuff, I can see not only what you're teaching but also results, and the results are amazing, and it's sort of like validating. Exactly. Sorry, I cut you out.
No. Go for it. Go for it. I was just trying to just reiterate. Like it is. If you don't want to buy anything, you don't have to buy anything. You want to pirate my course, pirate the course. But I've put a lot of effort. And I'm not trying to be egotistical about the result of things, but I've put probably more effort into material creation than 99.9% of artists. So check out the free lesson. If you like it, go for it. If you can't afford it, pirate it. But at the end of the day, just as long as you learn.
Yeah.
I hear you guys talking a lot about software and UI, but what do you guys think about the interactions between human and machine software? I mean, we work with a fucking mouse and keyboard.
Like you're talking like sexually or
Stuffing into your asshole.
Oh, Jesus Christ, man. How did it, like, that went from 0 to 100 real quick?
Yes, this is all about that. You just have to be, brave on those podcasts.
I'm lucky.
I
I don't, for some reason, my eyesight, like I've still got 20/20 vision after all this time. Maybe my eyesight's going to diminish in 5 years. Who knows? But I sometimes really, really hate computers. I hate the repetition. And I hate the fact that, your wrist can get sore and you've got to push through this RSI feeling. And, it sometimes does feel a bit monotonous. But at the end of the day, like, it is, like, it's just a certain type of creation, whether or not you're building a house with your hands or building a house in a computer. Like, I think it comes down to if you like creating stuff, and what you're creating it on shouldn't really matter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you also what works for you is your boxing, right? And that's
Yep.
really important. Have something that you're gonna step outside of your studio,
Yes.
and do something physical. Because sitting in front of a computer is just gonna destroy you.
I can say right now, the biggest change I made in my entire career was stepping outside and being physical and healthy, and going down that path, the active lifestyle path.
Yeah.
Because until then, like I said, I've already said it on this stream, I was a monster. If you just get wrapped up in this stuff, you go insane, literally. Like, you go insane. You've got to get out there. You've got to stay healthy and active, work out, eat good. Just eating the right food makes sitting at the computer so much easier. Like, I was literally that textbook example of someone living on Red Bull and takeaway and sleeping under my desk. And
it works short term, but not long term.
It works short term, but the amount of times I burned out and hated life, like not just CGI, but like hated life in general, like it made me depressed as a person. And it has been a long time since I've felt that down feeling where you're like, I can't get out of this. Like, what have I done to myself? So
yeah, I'm always make that mistake when I'm really overworked. There's a lot of going on, like a lot of projects going on.
yeah,
It's just like the idea, I don't have time to exercise, and it's the worst mistake you can make. Not taking
you've
care
got
of
to-
your body.
You've got to, yeah,
Yeah.
you've got to do it. You've got to do it.
Yeah.
There's no other way around it.
And eating is so important. Like
Yep.
eating the right stuff. It's all of your gut bacteria. The way you feed your body, it all goes through the gut, and your gut bacteria is basically almost regulating the way you feel. You can be working 20 hours and be as productive as someone who's working 8 hours because he's taking care of himself, and you're thinking you're working hard,
Yeah. You're sitting at a computer for 8 hours. How much sugar are you having in that time? Like how many insulin spikes have you had? And you've gone up and down throughout the day.
Yeah.
Like, I used to be extremely moody. I could be really happy or really angry. And it turns out that that was just a direct correlation with my addiction to sugar, you know.
Yep.
And it made me working with other people harder to work with, because they're like, well, you know, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, you were happy 2 hours ago. Like, what happened? No, nothing happened in the office. Nothing happened in work. It's just the way my body was reacting
My insulin
to
crash.
not
off.
having sugar.
Yeah,
Like,
so true.
yeah, it can, like, simple things like that can
Yep.
affect your relationship with, you know, with your work.
This next question says, why are so many people using V-Ray over Mental Ray?
That's a
You
joke
trolls.
question. You fucking trolls.
All right, next question.
How to choose the career after, or how do you choose a career after you tried various tasks? Like, I paint environments, character designs, props, visual effects, and After Effects. How should I choose
Do
when
whatever
you love
the
everything?
most. Yeah, whatever you love the most. Like, I've just gone down that path. I started out, I loved modeling. Didn't know what shading was, didn't know what texturing was. I just loved modeling and did that. I got sick of modeling, tried to find something else that I loved. You know, I looked at animation, I looked at a few things, I made a list of like 10 things, looked at what I thought was the most fun, and then went down that path. You know, it's just a feeling you get. Like, you can't force yourself down a career path. It just doesn't work. You've got to do what you love doing, and it's that simple. If you don't feel it, like right now, if you're not sitting at your desk thinking, shit, you know, like, I really want to make some shaders, then, you know, probably not best to be a shading artist. But I still, after all this time working this stuff, wake up some days and I'm like, I just really feel like making a sand shader for no fucking reason. You know, it's just so random, but it's like that there is just like, I don't know why I want to do it, but I want to do it. So, you know, it's that feeling that made me go down the material creation path. It's just really fun.
No.
Let me see. I deleted the question on accident. Hold on.
Yeah, guys,
Or
don't
a
be
couple
reliant
more
on
than-
sugar. Fuck sugar. Get
Yeah.
on that keto diet.
I would just say, just eat whenever you're hungry and until you're full, and just use some common sense, you know?
Yeah,
Have some sugar, but just don't
Yeah.
gorge on it, you know?
Yep.
Just nice balance.
I've been actually trying keto diet for a couple of days now. Well, not super clean one. It's basically, you know, I've cut my carbs to maybe 20%, 15%, and completely replaced it with fats. So like peanut butter and
Yep.
nuts and all that stuff. And it's basically like 60% of my diet is basically of healthy fats. I can tell you, I can. For first few days, I felt like shit because I had sugar cravings.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
like it's a fucking drug. It's like
It
you're
is a
getting
drug.
addicted to it.
It is a drug.
So you feel
It's a
like
hardcore drug.
it's almost like crack. Like I really
It-
want.
Haven't you seen that
Um,
image? Haven't you seen the image where they put people through an MRI machine and you
Yeah.
can see that sugar lights up, not in an identical way, but in a very similar way.
Yeah.
It's lighting up your brain. It's giving a
Just
similar
fucks you
response.
up as easy
Yeah.
as that. But I can
Yep.
tell you that not only I feel better. It's not for everyone, by the way, right? But I do feel better. I
Yep.
don't get cravings when I see a fucking ice cream. I'm like, whatever. I don't care.
You'll get them.
Yeah,
I
I rather.
It always comes
yeah,
back.
Of course.
It always comes back.
I rather eat
The-
kale.
Yeah. Oh, dear. I've got kale sitting in my fridge right now. It hasn't
just-
been touched.
I just like it's time to snack. Kale.
Oh, you need to eat. It's crazy how much more you need to eat when you're not having sugar. Like, I
Oh,
just
yes.
ate like 2 hours ago. Like, I can't, like, you know, it's
This
just
is devouring a full garden of vegetables. That's
Yeah. Yes, you can eat. So, like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But hey, you're getting full. I'm like when I get like a handful of almonds or even peanut butter. Peanut butter is great. Like if you just look
Yep.
for one that doesn't have any added sugar or anything, you just like take a
In
couple of
America,
spoons and
that
you're
doesn't
full.
exist.
Like you don't want to eat anything. You're just like fully full.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I eat raw almonds like every day, just
Yeah.
like there.
they're
Helps a lot.
fucking depleting water in California, but that's not the other. That's the other subject. Like a bunch of almonds take as much water as you showering for. a
Yeah, I
year or
believe that,
something.
man.
Just give me 1 second. I'll be back in a second.
Yeah, no
Sure.
worries. But yeah, dude, diet definitely helps. It's just like when you eat shitty, you just feel shitty. But when you eat well, you're gonna feel much better. Take time to exercise. Holy fuck. I haven't been training jiu-jitsu for months, and I've been mad at myself for not doing that. I just went back to the class yesterday, and I felt so spent after 2 hours that I had to sit down for 20 minutes because I was dizzy as fuck. Like I just went too much, right? And I was like, oh my god, like 3 hours, like getting there 40 minutes, getting back 20 minutes because like off traffic anymore after that. So it's like 3-4 hours out of home. There was so much productive work I could do. Bullshit. When I came back, I did way more than I expected I would do in an hour. And it's because I was fresh and that, I was feeling better. I was feeling physically fucking tired, but mentally like reborn. So
It's good.
yeah, you
Getting
just
back
have
into
to.
it.
You just have to.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best thing
So
that
you're-
can happen for you. Just like exercising, doing something that is good for your body, doing it regardless of whether you feel have time or not. Just find time. Just plan it in your week.
Yeah.
Do it at least once a week if you cannot do it more often than that. It's gonna make a difference.
So you reckon
true.
one more question, and then I'll
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
head
let's
off.
do
I'll
that.
get back onto
Yeah.
my
Yeah, you've been
course.
generous enough to be with
Yeah,
us
thanks.
No,
for
it's all
quite a
good.
long
It's all
time here.
good.
So
It's all good. I've had fun.
So last questions. I'm gonna put these together, but it says, do you plan on doing an architectural series, and or lighting? I'm sorry. It says, do a series of architectural and interior tutorials from scratch, lighting a scene, post processing, etc. Do you have plans to do those kind of?
So my plan for that is because I haven't worked as an architectural visualization artist, and I've always been pretty honest with myself. I did a lesson on it in the V-Ray course, and I thought that was one of the worst, like one of the shittier lessons that I did, and that was because I realized that when I'm doing my teaching, you've got to be very thorough with everything, and I couldn't be with that because I just hadn't done it enough. But I do know guys like like Daniel Rudishward. I feel like what would be more effective is teaching a guy like that how to make his own lessons and then letting him do that content, if that makes sense. Like teaching how I teach, but he has all the knowledge behind how the actual scenes put together and the workflow there. Because I could probably do it myself and it just wouldn't look like I couldn't feel good about that, charging for that when I know there's some other guy out there who could do a better job,
yeah.
if that makes sense. Like I would rather be doing, if I'm doing it, I want it to be the best it can be.
Shit, I would want to do hard surface modeling in Max or, V-Ray settings, but, I would not do the best
Yeah.
job at it.
Yeah.
So,
You have fun doing it, but whether or not someone's going to be able to use that in production and trust it,
yeah.
Because is like I've taught things, and this is one of the weirdest things. When you learn stuff as when you're in production and it's wrong, it's just you're on to the next job. But when you teach people things that's wrong, you're like, you realize the influence you have. You're like, holy shit, like there's people having arguments on forums about this, and I was the one who told them to do it that way, and I was wrong. Like
Yeah.
you've got to kind of respect that. If you're not good enough to teach it, then don't teach it, because it's just not going to be. You're going to be potentially causing more harm than good. So will I do something again on ArcViz in the lighting course? I will, but in terms of like dedicated lessons, my goal is to try and convince some of these other guys to teach.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right, we went through questions. Was fun.
Yeah.
John, do we have any current events?
I have a few, but if Grant needs to leave,
Yeah,
we
if
could
you
let him
if you
leave.
if you
No, what do you mean by events?
we just
like-
talk about like some news and what's going on in the world of
Yeah, I got like 10 minutes. I got
All
10
right,
minutes
cool.
before.
Let's go through a few.
Well, first off, have you guys heard about Tesla's new master plan?
No,
They're
what is
swapping
it?
from-
Yeah, he's planning on doing.
things.
Yeah, he's planning on doing a bunch of different things basically, but One of them is he's going to be doing like a kind of like Uber, but it's renting out Teslas that are not going to be used. So it's basically making money off of people that aren't using their Tesla at the time, so they could rent them out. So it's
like
kind of like
Airbnb,
Airbnb, but with cars. Yeah, exactly. It's
So
really
Elon
exciting.
Musk just wants to take over the world, so he can
Exactly.
prevent.
Pretty much.
He can
If he turns
can
evil at
prevent
any
from
point, we're all
Skynet to
fucked.
being created.
Yeah, he's got a lot of really cool things going on. There's another thing. It's just he's making semi trucks, for exporting and all that stuff, delivering big loads. But these trucks are gonna have solar panels above, on top of them. And these are it's gonna change the world drastically.
Automated, yeah? Like,
Yeah.
they just drive themselves.
Yeah,
kind of
even automated, exactly.
Yeah.
That's gonna be
So
huge.
crazy.
thing. We were born 20, 30 years too early. I wanted hover cars. I was never given it,
I don't know, man.
really
I think
fucking
we were born in the
dark
right
ages.
time because you see the whole transition from no phones or like line
Oh.
phones where you actually have to dial by fucking moving that ring around, and if someone had zeros in his phone number, you would curse him for being a fucking idiot. Fucking idiot, so many zeros.
Man, what about, like, okay, we've missed, like, reversal of aging. Talk about being born a little bit too early. Imagine getting to, like, 60 or 70 years old on your deathbed.
You can't have everything.
Yeah.
I believe
I just
it.
wanted
I believe it.
immortality. Is it so much to ask?
Right, but then someone would say like, "Do you remember those times when there were no cell phones?" And you're like, "Yeah, I remember those times." Whereas
4
now
years
it's like, "What are you talking about? No cell phones? Like no internet? What?"
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I really hit me was like, eventually our daughters are gonna like come home and they're gonna be like, look what I got. They got a new like bionic arm or something.
You mean
Oh.
It's like
taking
it's
off
like-
their VR goggles?
yeah, but it's just like replacing limbs for better, efficient, limbs and stuff. That's gonna be
Yeah.
crazy.
Like, or they just print it at home.
Yeah.
Like biomolecular printing. That's going to be crazy when they can like turn carbon into anything and then print it like at home.
I think
It's
Ready
gonna be
Player
good.
One is what the future is gonna be like. A lot of VR and outside
Yeah,
world really
a lot.
shitty.
Mix of VR. What's the something
AR,
Magic Loop or Magic Leap? They're
Yeah,
using
Magic-
that
yeah.
oscillating fiber optic, projector. It's like a fiber optic cable that like rotates as they pass a color of light through it, and because of motion blur, your eye perceives it as an image because it's oscillating so fast and the colors changing. It's like projecting out points of light that in real time end up looking like an image being beamed directly into your retina. It's
Yeah.
just crazy
So
the amount of
badass.
like that's going to be totally like when you're walking around there's no phone or like you're not sitting down at a desk to work anymore because your whole vision is the screen. Like imagine working in 3ds Max or in a concept painting and being able to just like walk around it, scale
Yeah.
it, move it, all with touch gestures. It's pretty crazy.
The future is crazy. Facebook
Yeah, man.
actually finally launched their massive solar powered internet drone too.
Damn.
So that's gonna be crazy.
And then you've
Dude,
seen
imagine
the
those
Wi-Fi
flying
all
over
over.
North Korea and China.
Boston Dynamics. Have you seen those robots?
Yeah.
Oh my god! Like all right. So that like behind closed doors, there's like military contracts being written,
Yeah.
and you just fucking know they're strapping
Yep.
miniguns on those
It has to.
goddamn cow dogs.
They do.
You know they're strapping miniguns
100%
on those
they do.
things. Like, what do you do? Like, you're in Syria and you see like this like horse dog robot coming over the hill with two miniguns attached to it,
fucking you
like
up.
linked to a drone. We're in trouble.
Yeah,
We're in
it's
trouble. If
happening.
AI goes crazy, and those things learn how to reproduce themselves, like it's like literally like a T500 or something.
It's gonna be Robopocalypse, but without the
Yep.
toasters
Yeah,
and
exactly.
microwaves.
I was gonna say
Elon
that
Musk
exactly.
said. Elon Musk said his biggest fear is
Yeah.
the AI becoming out of control. Because of where do you draw? Like, at what point does it become self-aware. Like once it can start to learn, does it just start to learn exponentially, and then like before you fucking know it,
Yeah, he's not the
it
only one who
literally,
said that too.
yeah.
I
He
think-
said he's investing like I think it was like 10 million or something he invested this year or last year into the ways of sustaining like, you know, AI like and keeping it contained. Like
I don't think you can stop it really,
it's
because you can make legislation and, you know, pay money to stop it, and there's always going to be some asshole that has more money that's like, fuck it, I want to do it,
who
and
just
they will
releases
do
it
it.
behind
Yeah.
closed doors. Yeah.
I think what's gonna happen is there is sort of, it's gonna be almost like an evolution of what humanity is and how it's gonna
Yeah.
connect to
people
AI.
don't care. People don't care about their privacy anymore.
Yeah,
They'll log
they
into
don't.
that Pokemon Go thing and give Google
was saying.
complete access
up.
to their entire account.
Yeah.
Who cares? You got to catch them all. So, you know.
And it's like real-time recording of your whereabouts and your
Yeah.
place, and pretty much a full real-time map of your world, including
they've
your
given-
personal life and family and everything, depending where you play.
It's like government
bro.
conspiracy there.
It's like Google knows more about you than like your wife or something, you know?
Yeah.
Like your wife would love to have that information on you.
Yeah.
But, oh
Shit.
well.
Another
No one
thing
cares.
is separate news. The Stranger Things. Have you guys watched that yet on Netflix?
No, I haven't.
Really
Stranger
awesome
Things?
show. Yeah.
Oh shit! Yeah, I just binged watched it.
Did you?
Oh,
yeah, I only
fuck
watched.
yeah,
the
I loved
first
it.
episode, or the second episode, and I'm just
If
like,
you haven't seen
I
it, go see it. I think the worst thing we could do is just to hype it even more, because it's like it's gonna become one of those shows that everyone is talking like about how fucking awesome it is, and then you
great.
watch it, and because you're overhyped, you're not enjoying it as much. So
Yeah.
no, it's awesome. Just go watch it on
It is.
Netflix.
Great production.
Okay.
It's really well done.
But that's pretty much it.
What's it
that I
about?
had. It's basically about I don't know, aliens.
If you
I'd
don't
say.
want to
Okay.
spoil
I'm
too
sold.
much, yeah. If you don't want to spoil too much, think of Super 8, but like really,
Okay.
but actually well done.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you kind of lost me there for a second. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's
But like
great.
imagine Super 8 with a good script and production value. Let's put it this
Nice.
way. Yeah. I
Yeah.
guess that would be the closest you can get without spoiling too much. It's really good. I've enjoyed. I started watching first episode. I was like, no, I'm gonna fucking watch it, the whole thing until I'm done. I'm not gonna go to sleep. It just has to happen. So it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to make it last. Like, watch an episode
Oh
per
fuck
week.
it, watch it all.
Alrighty, guys. I've just got
Alright,
to keep
man.
going on this lighting lesson. The guys have been waiting so long now, and
Yeah,
this has
we
been
had
good
you for
because, like,
long
last
enough,
night
dude.
I was going crazy, you know, trying to finish this lesson, like recording like little. With the V-Ray lessons, I used to be able to do some of those like in 4 or 5 hours. I just sit down, record it, start to finish, you know, edit a few things. Now it's just like so much more involved with trying to break this stuff down. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And thanks heaps for like checking out the interview.
Dude, amazing. I'm
Yeah, thank
really
you.
glad you.
Yeah, I mean, I
you
love what
availed-
you guys are doing with Learn Squared too. I felt like there was always a gap with concept art, you know, who was teaching concept art besides Noman, and, you know, you guys have kind of filled that hole. So
Yeah,
it's
there's
really
a few
cool.
names.
I
The
love
guys at
watching you guys
Brainstorm are
stuff.
doing a great job too. You know, there are obviously other schools. It's just like
Yep,
we
yep.
have a little different formula.
We
and it
don't want to
works.
pitch those though. We only
Yeah.
want to pitch our own stuff.
Anyways, dude,
there's
thanks
a lot of
for
good stuff.
joining the stream. Thanks for being
No,
here,
it was
answering
great,
all the
man.
questions and
It was
talking with
great.
us. It was fucking awesome. And you know, anytime you want to talk and have another stream, just feel free, join us.
Yeah, I wouldn't
anytime
mind
you want.
jumping in on one of your art streams, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
If you want to talk more about 3D and that stuff, I'd happily jump
Yeah, dude,
in.
we do those Twitch streams.
Yep.
You're always fucking welcome. You know,
How did you get that relationship where you're like featured by them?
I
I saw that the other day where you're like a partner with them.
Yeah, we're now officially partners, which means, you know, We have some extra benefits from just being there and twitching. Obviously, it comes with the fact that we have to be pretty much consistent, which is something we already planned to do.
Right.
We obviously
that
cannot
puts me
say
out.
exact points of what the partnership does, but it opens up more doors. I'll put it this way. From perspective of a viewer, it doesn't really change much, apart from the fact that now for sure we're gonna be twitching at least twice a week. But yeah, it's just consistency, I guess, and what you're doing. But I guess I mean they've noticed what we've been doing, so that was good, and
Yeah,
we want
nice.
to keep
I
doing
mean-
it. It's just awesome. We realized that much like what you said, it's just like we realized there is a point of entry for what students can afford. Some students
Yeah.
can afford to take classes, others cannot. And what we try to do is make sure that even if you cannot, at least you can come over and enjoy, spending
Yeah.
time with us as we talk about specific subjects or answer questions and just do something on the screen, and we just want to
I
keep
don't
doing
think
that.
we would have chosen teaching if it was about money. You know what I mean? Like deep down, I really feel that. Like I'm.
Yeah, it's a byproduct of
yeah.
what you do. I mean,
It's
the
just trying
fact
to
that you
share
have
some
to,
knowledge.
yeah, it's sharing knowledge. It's funny because you share knowledge. It's almost like giving away your 10 years of 20 years or
Yeah,
however you've
like
been in
it
industry
gives
for
you the same
free.
feeling you give a homeless guy when you give him $5. Like
Yeah.
it's for me, like it's great. Like if you want to support the artist, but I just like getting this stuff out of my head,
Yeah.
and filling it with boxing or something else in life. Like it's
Yeah,
been in there too
course.
long. Like it's time for other people to take it and improve on it.
And
That's another thing I
there's
love seeing when you see people do better than what you did. Using what you
yeah.
taught. So,
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
That's the best. That's the best feeling in the world.
yeah,
And
Get
that
your
is, it
job.
really
become
is.
better than you. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, obviously there's a business behind it. You're doing it out of passion, but also you have to value your time as well. Especially when you need to. But that's true. One of the reasons to do that, because if you want to be teaching, unless you're like a behemoth like Nomon, right?
Yeah.
Or Art Center or something, then
Yeah.
it's not really like you can definitely make better if you do something else for sure.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily going in with the idea that you're gonna make a bank. That's not the goal. I mean, it's more of a byproduct of the support that you're getting just by being a person that delivers that knowledge, And
Yes, yeah,
and-
it feels good. It feels good to be able to help people. Like since I've started the course, there's been guys who have, messaged me saying I've saved them $50,000 on rendering power because they were just about to buy, like guys who are struggling with their bills, and they're
Yeah.
like, dude, you saved us from having to spend that because we were just rendering wrong. Something simple as that, you're like, holy shit, like I actually, like if I had not created that lesson, that guy was fucked, like he was potentially going bankrupt because they couldn't afford to render all the stuff off in the right time. There's been guys who've gotten jobs from what I've been teaching. I mean, that's just such a great feeling when
Oh,
someone
yeah.
tells you like,
The best.
dude, like I can't believe it. Like I finally got this job I wanted. Like, thank you so much. You're like, holy shit. Like it puts it in. Sometimes you just sit there and you feel like you're going crazy recording a lesson, but then you think, holy, this actually might really help some people. Like Dimitri, the guy who's helping me on lesson 6, he's from Tajikistan. You know what I mean? He's working for some random, CGI company over there, and he was able to learn from me and then take my position at Cream, and now he's doing work that was better than anything I was doing there, all within
Yeah,
the space
there you
of
go.
like a year and a half, and you're like, holy shit, like what is going on? Like
It's awesome.
it's a really good feeling.
Yeah,
I
those
love
success stories
teaching.
are the best for sure.
I love teaching. I love it way more than working for another boss or something like that. But
Yeah, because I mean, literally, you're just doing something cool that you want to do anyways, and you just happen to talk about it as you're
Yeah.
doing it. So
Yeah.
it's awesome, and you're not really asking for much,
No.
the lessons
I've
the
had a
course you
massive
have.
amount of support.
Yeah.
I have had a massive amount of support, and at times I haven't even deserved it. You know what I mean? I have been so far from perfect. Like I've made so many mistakes doing this stuff, but when it's all said and done, you know, like all the negative stuff aside, I feel like I've made more of a positive influence, you know, and that's, you know, that's just what keeps you going. So I feel like I've been in a pretty good headspace the last few months. Like one of the things for me was consistently updating things, whether it was, you know, little or big, it didn't matter. Like it was just keeping that consistency. So now that I'm not boxing nowhere near as much, it just feels good, you know, it just feels good to get that
I'm
stuff.
just reading comments.
Yeah, I know. The
shit.
fucking Steven Davidson, you piece of shit. He's been supporting me for like 3 years now.
Just keep battling, keep pedaling.
Yeah.
Appeal to his ego.
He knows how to do it. Steven's been a supporter literally since I think the pre-sale, like when I didn't even know what the hell Mastering Vray was. So
That's awesome. All right, dude. Thanks for being
man.
here. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
everyone who joined us live. Sorry for technical issues. It's totally my fault. I'm trying new
all
setups. What I want to do is basically improve production quality of this and potentially make more of art cafes, and it's also going to apply directly to the Twitch streams for Learn Squared. So it's all of this experimental phase where shit just goes wrong. But we're gonna nail it. It's just hardware and software. That's really what it is, and we're just gonna figure it out and make sure that we don't have those hiccups anymore. Either way, thanks for joining us. That was amazing episode, and till the next time, guys.
Peace.
Yeah.
Peace.
See you guys. Thanks for watching.